Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton at Big C Sports. Coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada. We love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful July the 14th, 2020. Round of the Portes, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Well, Charlton, it's a day of quandary in the world of sports and education. Everybody's trying to figure out what the next move is going to be. We know the president doesn't have a plan for reopening the school and keeping the kids safe. We see many more players testing positive for COVID-19. But first and foremost, I want to thank the frontline healthcare workers, Charlton, the nurses, doctors, first responders, for the wonderful job that they do every day.
They really do a great job every day. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars also all around the world. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing from 3,000 miles away. And I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. But you better have a smart TV, Big C, or you'll be sitting there looking at a still picture. Man, I've been pausing. I love pausing. It helps me get my breath, Big C, but I'll never pause on the Veterans Crisis Hotline. They are experienced in helping veterans and their loved ones get help, Big C. Why is that so important to you?
Well, Charlton, it's one of the most admirable things that you can do in this country is try to help and save a veteran's life, Charlton. They struggle so much when they come back home and try to assimilate into society, and we're losing some 22 veterans a day to suicide. I know we're losing a horrific number of people to COVID-19, Charlton, but these veteran suicides were existing long before COVID-19 and will still continue to exist after COVID-19. And I would love for our federal government to put as much emphasis on that as they do talking about China, Charlton. But, you know, we got to, as American citizens, we have to band together and hopefully fight this disease of suicide that's going on. It's rampant amongst our veterans. It's rampant amongst our citizens. We've lost some 261 teenagers to suicide this year, Charlton. We're only halfway through the year. 261 teenagers have lost their life to suicide. So the government needs to put more emphasis on what can really help all of our American citizens as well as the rest of our general public.
Yeah, we want to do our part. We'll do the best we can to do our part, Big C. I want to make sure that people know that. 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or they can text 838-255. That's 838-255. If you're online, simply go to veteranscrisisline.net. That's veteranscrisisline.net, and you can help people get some help. Also, very happy to be affiliated with Valley Homes Weekly TV on Dish TV, Direct TV, AT&T Uverse, TV 53, home of the San Francisco Giants and the Say Hey Kid. And when you reach out to them, just tell them Big C sent you. Our goal is simple: recruit 100 real estate brokers, put their property listings on TV, just like McDonald's does it. Car dealerships do it, and sports teams will do it too. Let TV and real estate work for you. 800-772-8624. 800-772-8624. For those of you looking for opportunities in real estate, go to bigcsports.pacwm.com. That's bigcsports.pacwm.com, and you can get some help. Big C, I know we're getting into the world of a lot of good things happening. Maybe if you believe in good things happening in the sports world. But I was just doing some things today. I was listening to some comedians, and I ran across some old, I still have cassette decks that work, Big C, cassette tapes. I was listening to some Richard Pryor. I found some Eddie Murphy. I even found some Jackie Gleason, Robin Harris, and I compared that with Chris Rock, and I still want to say that Richard Pryor, the late Richard Pryor, is the king of the universe. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, when we think about generational comedy amongst a lot of those adults, you know, entertainers that we've listened to over the years on the airways and seen live in productions, Charlton. I mean, everybody has their genre. I mean, the things that Richard Pryor laid down, he learned from other people like Rudy Ray Moore and Red Fox, Charlton. But he was a pioneer of his own mind, and Charlton is one of the greatest of all time.
Yeah, he really was one of the greatest of all time. So I love just bringing up some things that make people laugh, because we all need laughter. I know if we were on the original schedule of things in the world of sports, would you believe today would have been the All-Star game down in Chavez Ravine, Los Angeles? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you know, this has been the way of change of life in America, Charlton. From all what was normal is no longer that. We've had to make a lot of adjustments. And, you know, last night I looked at some baseball that was on television, Charlton, a scrimmage game between a pro team. And, I mean, it seemed eerie in a way, because I could hear the noise of the bat. I could hear the noise of the players, you know, gathering back and forth. But I couldn't get any crowd, Charlton, and it seemed very empty and hollow. And I'm not talking about the stadium. I'm just talking about the event.
Yeah.
That it lacked enthusiasm. I know players will say, well, you know, it seems close to normal, but it's not. And I'm trying to figure out how you're going to stay inspired to play a real sporting event without the enthusiasm of the crowd.
Well, have you tuned in lately to the South Korean professional baseball leagues, where everybody was all hyped about it about a month ago, and they play their games without fans in the stands? And I don't know anyone tuning in to watch it now. I think I watched about 2 innings the first night, and then I DVR'd the second game. But I haven't gone back to the TV. I don't even set my DVR to watch a game that doesn't have fans. Big C, your thoughts?
And that's the troubling part. As Americans, we've become so accustomed to the overrun and enthusiasm of crowds. You know, that's what gets you hyped as a player. It's never changed from high school, Charlton. You know, and I can embellish all the times that, you know, the crowd roar enthused me even more. It took me to different heights of adrenaline levels, Charlton, and made you seem to want to perform even more to entertain them, because they paid their good money to come into the ballparks and play. But you know, every player who's played professional, collegiate, high school sports goes to practice. And you know, you go back to your high school days and you think about, you know, when they used to have those 4-team scrimmages and stuff, where 4 teams would get together, Charlton, at a field, and you'd utilize half the field in these scrimmages, and these guys you did not know generally. So this is what it akins to me in a way, is having big-time scrimmages.
Yeah, I still remember that. I don't tune into South Korean baseball. Hey, I'm wishing them all the well. The swing of the bat, we love hearing the swing of the bat. In fact, the Giants are supposed to be playing the Dodgers in about 9 more days. But I also, when I think about the way baseball compares themselves to the bubble, if you think about, there's only one Major League Baseball team in Major League Baseball that's in Canada. Oh, Canada! But Canada, because of the quarantine for 14 days, they don't want people from, as POTUS said, they're trying to build a wall to keep the southern scum out of Canada, Big Z. They don't want the scum coming from the United States to scum up Canada. So they're talking about the Toronto Blue Jays actually going into Buffalo, which I think is about 105, 110 miles away, Toronto from Buffalo, and they would be playing their games would be played in Buffalo, New York. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you know, I mean, they're trying to find ways to get the game played, and I can understand the restrictions that Prime Minister Trudeau have put on other countries as far as coming into Canada.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you look at the rapid rise of COVID-19 here in the United States, which is going to make it difficult for any kind of sports to be played, Charlton, regardless of which level it is. And, you know, the team going down to Buffalo, which there's a close relationship between the two cities, I'm going to assume.
Yeah.
That, you know, with the distance-wise between Buffalo and Toronto. But, you know, I still think it's going to be hard, Charlton, to pull all this off. As much as people seem enthusiastic about it and the want and need for sports, it seems to be that COVID-19 is rising even more and more as the weather gets warmer. And we know that the baseball carries better when the weather's warmer.
Yep.
But this COVID-19 is carrying as well as the baseball does in the heat.
Yeah, there's even talk, and when you talk about the number one media market in Canada, it would be Toronto. The number one media market in the United States would be New York. But there's rumors that the Yankees, the Mets, and the Phillies could head to Buffalo for road games against the Blue Jays. So I know it's all based on science, and we'll have to see what happens with science. Buffalo, they still, I think it's called the Bisons. that they have a club that's reached out to Major League Baseball because people in Buffalo, they actually they cover the CFL, they cover NHL, and there are times actually when the Buffalo Bills have had what's called a home game, even though it was an away game in Toronto. So those two metropolitan areas, they tend to support each other. Big, so your thoughts?
Well, I think right now it's beyond the level of support, Charlton. It's about the desperation of all these sports trying to get games played on the field. But, are you going to play these games with fans in the stand? Or are you just going to be taking that road drive down to Buffalo and playing in an empty stadium?
Yeah, and it seems like they're going to figure it out. It's almost like sometimes there was a show when I was growing up called Ripley's Believe It or Not, and Ripley would come on and say some things that were really not true or not real, and they would ask people to believe it or not. But you can believe this. Major League Baseball, Charlie Blackmon from the Colorado Rockies, he stated that he's recovered from COVID-19 and that he's actually ready to play Major League Baseball. And if there's any light at the end of the tunnel, I've always felt that science would use athletes as the guinea pig, because if someone can recover from anything, they're going to use athletes more. Up in Denver, he's an all-star outfielder, the first Major League player that was known to have tested positive for COVID-19. So he returned to the Rockies for his first workout on Monday after getting the clear to rejoin his teammates. So if they're going to look at him as an example, they're going to say, wait a minute, the first guy tests positive. He's already ready to get back into the swing of things. And I think foolishly, they may use him as an example. Big, so your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, let me give you some first-hand knowledge. Nobody fully recovers from COVID-19. This is a life-lingering epidemic and disease that people are coming down with. We don't have a full analogy of how it affects the human body even after you've had this tendency to recover. I'm a victim of this disease myself. And so the long-term, especially, when you think about your stamina, your lung capacity, your organs, that have been bothered, Charlton, this disease is not like catching the flu. Otherwise, so many people would not have been hospitalized for it. It is a debilitating disease, and there's several major league players that have caught it that say that there's no way that they can come back and play. They've lost a lot of endurance and stress from their body. So Charlie Blackmon making this statement, Charlton, and it's unfounded. There's no medical evidence that he has recovered 100%. You can say that he's gotten over the roughest part of the disease, but as we witness every day when we turn on the television and look at the news cycle, and we see this pandemic with the numbers continuously rising, especially here in the United States, where we have 37 states that are rising numbers. I mean, Florida once again today set a record for the number of positive tests and deaths, as well as Texas did, Charlton. So for players to say that they've recovered, you're going to go out there, and we don't know what the residual effect of this thing is going to be once you had COVID-19 and you go back among people who haven't had COVID-19. Do you still have the ability to spread the disease? Yeah,
and just like Charlie Blackmon stated that he feels lucky that his experience was not nearly as severe as many others who've been infected, and he said that he doesn't know how it affects everybody. Everybody responds to different things in a different way, but I do believe that Major League Baseball, like Ripley's Believe It or Not, they're going to try to tell everybody that you can respond the same way a man in his 20s is going to respond. And again, everybody's different. I wish him well, but it just seems like there's so much pressure on the industry of baseball, the whole industry of football, the industry of basketball. There's so much pressure that the people who are going to benefit the most, you can say owners, but some of the players, they believe they're bulletproof. And maybe it is different. Not everybody's going to be affected the same. So I hope this message is not a bad message that many people feel, if Charlie can do it, I can do it. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you have different immune systems in every individual, Charlton. And not only that, you have different family situations with every individual. When you think about their children, their spouses, their other family members, auxiliary family members, that have different breakdowns in their immune system that make them more vulnerable than others.
Yeah.
And so you have to think well beyond just the one individual saying that he recovered. There's family members with weakened immune systems. I mean, there's not a family in America that does not have somebody with a weakened immune system to some capacity. So these are the things that have to be considered just as much as you think about players going out there on the surface and playing.
Yeah, it's all true. Now, ironically, today, as Charlie Blackmon's. He's a young guy. What was the guy for the Oklahoma State? I'm 40. I'm a man. Well, he's well under 40, Big C. So maybe young people can recover different. But about 10 Major League Baseball umpires, they've decided to opt out over concerns because as you get up and older in life, you tend to take better care of your health. You don't run around the way a lot of young people do. So when you have 10 Major League Baseball umpires, they've opted out of this season, choosing not to work some of the games for the shortened schedule anyway because of the concerns over COVID-19. And to me, that's a truism for most people that are dealing with whether they go back or not. Los Angeles Dodgers pitcher David Price, San Francisco Giants catcher Buster Posey, Washington Nationals infielder Ryan Zimmerman, they're among a dozen players or so who just refuse to participate. Unlike Charlie Blackmon, they tend to be a little bit more well-read about their health, or at least it seems that way, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlie Blackmon is not the only major leaguer who's considering playing. When you look at the dozens and dozens of Major League Baseball players that are going to play, I mean, a lot of players, the situation, the reason why they're looking at playing is to stay in that position to get their free agency.
Yeah.
And that's what's driving a lot of players. You have to have 6 consecutive years to qualify for free agency. Other than that, you're going to be stuck with an organization for 10 years.
Yeah.
And so this is what the driving force is in a lot of players. They figure once they start playing that they potentially can opt out after a couple of games. They can say that something's wrong with them. Everybody knows you can get a mysterious groin pull, a hamstring pull anytime that you want as a professional athlete.
Yeah.
So, when you look at these scenarios, you really have to understand the true driving force behind it.
Yeah. And who can tell a guy that is not suffering from extreme jock itch or a pulled hamstring? I think NBA basketball players say he broke his hand. How do you break your hand when you're not even playing? But it's all fair level war. Major League Baseball, irrespective of Charlie Blackmon, and I really hope that just like Ripley's Believe It or Not, I hope that his example is an example that you can get through it faster. Just depends on the person. There are 76 full-time Major League Baseball umpires, and I think more than 20 of them are over age 55. And so if you have guys that are up over the 50 age mark, most people are on some type of medication, and COVID affecting a person that may not be on medication may be a lot different than somebody who is. That's why a lot of the people in the older population were hit more hard. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, COVID has hit every era of the population, Charlton. Originally, it was a lot of elderly people, but it is balanced out now when you think about COVID. And COVID has hit males, Charlton, much more harder
really
than it has hit female members of the society. When you think about COVID-19 related deaths, it's really disproportionate. 6% of the COVID-19 deaths in America have been attributed to the male population,
really?
And only 40%. And I'm not trying to make light of either side because both numbers are horrific. But that's why when you look at these athletes and especially these older participants in these sports, they're saying, well, I really have to look at the science on this because my chances are greater of contacting this disease and dying from it more than just the average person.
That's interesting. I was also reading where they're looking at certain blood types that are affected by it. Just like people react different to the flu, not everybody has the same reaction to the flu or other type of viruses. Even the common cold, some people act a lot different to it. But even so with baseball, we really don't know. It's an individual thing. Some people can get knocked out by it. Others can just kind of get the sniffles and get over it. At least that's what a lot of the athletes are saying. But I do want to look at that bubble experience, because if the bubble experiment is going to have any type of measuring stick where people start looking at what's happening in the bubble, then we got to look at what's going on in the bubble and see, is it really holding up the way a lot of people. I'm going to say something really stupid, but it won't be the first time. Sometime I've heard of people that came up pregnant. And you say, how'd you get pregnant? They say, well, I was using a condom, but the condom broke. I mean, okay, how'd the condom break? Sometimes they just don't use it. If they have a situation where this bubble breaks, Big C, they're going to have to blame the bubble, not the misuse of the bubble, if that makes any sense to you, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, as you look at this bubble situation, Charlton, they've already had 3 players that have walked outside the bubble and got put back in even more quarantine. So you have to think about, weren't these players educated prior to getting to the bubble and leaving outside the bubble and having to go back into another 14-day quarantine? I think that's what these players are choosing to do because they really don't
They're
want
smart.
to play. Is that
Yeah.
they're trying to find ways to skirt the system.
Yeah.
And one of the ways of skirting the system is to order some food from outside of the bubble and go outside the bubble and pick it up, Charlton. So
Yeah.
I think these players are more intelligent than what everybody wants to give them credit for, saying that they're dying to play. No, they're trying not to die
Yep.
when you look at this situation. So if you can create any scenario to keep you from having to be in close proximity to other players, from other teams. That's what these players are doing right now.
Yeah, it's funny how some guy did. When I go into the bank and they have this line that says stand 6 feet behind the person in front of you, so you can actually see it. So I wonder if those letters or lines they're using for athletes not to go outside of the bubble, are they erasable? Where people just erase them? Does that make sense to you, Big C?
No, I mean, these players are making a conscientious effort, Charlton, to be caught and not have to participate. I mean, as I keep saying all the time, we don't see press conferences from players saying, I want to be in the bubble. I want to be there playing. I want to be exposing myself potentially to COVID-19. We don't hear that. We keep hearing that from the media.
Yeah.
And at times I kind of think that the players are a little more intelligent than what people give them credit for, even though all of them don't have college degrees. But to just look at this situation where you're telling these players, okay, you have to go out there and play.
Yeah.
I look at the time that we're in America when we got 45 million Americans unemployed. And none of these unemployed Americans make anywhere near what an NBA player generally makes in one paycheck during the course of the year.
Right.
So you think about those people who are struggling on this unemployment and don't make much, in a 12-month period as an NBA player would make in one paycheck cycle, and these players saying that they're struggling. I have a hard time believing that these players are destitute and they have no choice but to play because of the economics. They're going to find themselves out on the street and homeless and sleeping on a tent on a sidewalk in one of these major cities. I don't see that.
Yeah.
So I constantly see the push from the press and the rest of the media saying, we need sports. We need a distraction in America. And we can use these guys to make the distraction in America, and they won't mind. Look at the amount of money they make.
Yeah.
Look at the amount of money that Americans don't make, that struggle every day, and for the past 3 or 4 months have been unemployed, trying to find a way to keep a roof over their head and fill their food in their children's stomach, Charlton. So, I see the disparity as being unfair.
Yeah, well, it's like they say, it's all fair in love and war. NBA basketball player Harrison Barnes of the Sacramento Kings. He's also played for the Golden State Warriors at their time. And Nick Beasley of the New Jersey Nets. I guess they're the last two guys that have come up with a positive test for COVID-19. And that's a couple of guys that have played for the New Jersey, actually Brooklyn Nets, and also Sacramento Kings that have tested positive for COVID-19. And no matter what they're saying about Charlie Blackmon with Major League Baseball for the Colorado Rockies, I think with Buddy Hield also tested positive for the Sacramento Kings with COVID-19. He won the NBA three-point shootout. But again, they are young players, and I think they're going to be guys that do and guys that don't. But even the guys that are testing positive, they seem to be recovering. Maybe they're younger. Maybe they're not on some type of blood pressure medication. And that seems to be a little bit of light at the end of the road. But they're still testing positive, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, the Sacramento Kings have had 4 players test positive thus far with COVID-19. And that has to be an alarming scenario when you're looking at the Sacramento Kings. This is a team that is not going to win the NBA title.
Yeah.
So how many players and how many personnel and family members do you have to look at putting at risk for someone to achieve a number that they want to achieve by having a number of games played? And that's what I really don't understand. You're bringing teams in, 22 teams in to this bubble to chase an NBA title, which really only maybe 4 of them have a legitimate chance at chasing this title. We saw what just happened with the stars from the Houston Rockets, Charlton, testing positive, not coming in. And this is the 4th New Jersey and Sacramento players that have tested positive for COVID-19.
Yeah.
So what is the number? What is the break line number for an NBA team to say, okay, this is enough. We can't go any further. We've had X number of players test positive. We've run out enough players to fill a basketball team. So you're going to go out there instead of having 12 or 15, you're going to have just 8 players that you can dress out and think that you can get through this?
Yeah, well, I think it's just human nature Just like the people that say, oh, the condom broke. Yeah, right, the condom broke or you didn't use it properly. Either way, people have a way of justifying what they want to do. Ironically, when you say what's the number of players, Big C, there is no definite answer, but Miami Heat coach Eric Spoelstra, he said that we're putting together something that we think is really safe, like those broken condoms, and everybody's health as the number one priority, as Harrison Barnes and a couple other players, Russell Westbrook, testing positive also. I'm sure they were doing everything they thought was safe also. But we know that nothing is 100% guaranteed. And I think if you look at that protocol...
Yes, there is. Taxes, death, and trouble. That's 100% guaranteed in life. Taxes, death, and trouble.
Well, people are not afraid of death, so they don't care. There's people that join the military. There's people that do a lot of things. They ride motorcycles. They do everything they want to do. And that's what I'm finding out is the way that people are going to live their lives. Not everybody cares about a long life. They just care about what are they doing today. And when you have NBA basketball coach Eric Spoelstra says that nothing's 100% guaranteed, I think that's what they sold to these players who don't read science, and they're going to trust what a coach says that nothing's 100% guaranteed. Therefore, everybody take a chance. Make your thoughts.
Well, I mean, like I said, at some point I'd like to hear from the players as being their own spokesperson. We've had everybody, including us, be spokespersons for these players. And I would like to see them get a press conference. That they can act like the president if they want. They can skirt around everything.
Yeah.
But I'd like to see the players. I think that they're articulate enough to be able to answer the questions and answer the poignant questions about what's occurring, what their expectations and outlooks are, and the fear factors that they possess.
Yeah. I think a lot of times it's like Ripley's Believe It or Not. Some people believe they're bulletproof, and it doesn't really matter what a lot of other people think. They're going to get on that motorcycle. I live in Northern California, and oftentimes I love going up to Lake Tahoe. They just had the golf tournament up over the weekend in Lake Tahoe, and no matter how scary that road is on Highway 50 driving up, or sometimes Interstate 80, there are always guys on motorcycles that are racing through on Highway 50, Big C, and you have these 300-foot drops down to the bottom, but they'll race around on a motorcycle as if they're on flat land. I think it's just the way people think. NBA, they've had 19 players test positive prior to going into the bubble in Orlando, and 2 players test positive since arriving in the bubble in Orlando. And it tells me that these are probably the same guys that drive their motorcycles on twisted roads without worried about if they're going to make it there or not. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, everybody rides motorcycles. I used to ride when I was younger. It all depends on the guts that you have. The bikes are faster and more powerful than what they were back then. But, when you look at these athletes, when you look at riding a bike, that is an individual conscientious choice.
Yeah.
You're one-on-one with the elements. When you look at these players going into this bubble, you're not one-on-one with the elements. You're dealing with a situation where there are other entities that come in and potentially can affect you and infect you.
Yeah.
So, it's a lot different than an individual getting on a bike. And when you get on that bike, you're not looking at negativity about being on that bike, but you can't say that you're going into this bubble without having negative thoughts.
Yeah, and I just feel that they're doing it anyway. Just like I think it was about 2 weeks ago, we were saying that players are probably not going to go because they read more now. And then I felt like I slapped myself in the face, Big C, because Laura Ingraham, she knows more about men than I do. And she said they're going to shut up and dribble. And Laura Ingraham was right, so I had to choke on my own words. Before we get to the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause, Laura Ingraham, at least on that, she was right. She tends to know more about men than I do, and I am a man, but I tend to listen to my doctor. That's why I'm staying away from a lot of people. We'll take the Big C pause, also known as the Big C timeout. We'll be back in just a moment. All right, we are back from the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on apps all over the world. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast, and you'll hear Welcome to the Show. We'll do our thing. I wanna get into the thing that Laura Ingraham said, shut up and dribble, and players are saying, okay, Laura, we'll shut up and dribble. WNBA basketball, Washington Mystics star, I think his name is Elena Della Donna, she's denied a doctor's request for her pre-existing condition and what it might do to her if she comes in contact with COVID-19. And that's where you get a second opinion. As there was a movie named North Dallas 40, and a lot of athletes, they have team doctors that are under a lot of pressure if they want to remain that team doctor, and they better do what the ownership says. I would think she should get a second opinion and not wait for someone to tell her that she feels good if she doesn't. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, she's actually had 3 opinions. She's had her own personal doctor. The league has put an independent doctor out as well as a league doctor. Elena Della Donna has suffered from Lyme disease in the past, Charlton, and the league doctors that they're pointing to this are saying, well, it's not considered a pre-existing condition,
Right.
which perplexed me in many ways. You have a disease,
Yeah.
and people say it's not a pre-existing condition. And this is what money and lies is telling people continuously throughout this COVID-19 from the administration on down. You have somebody who's been diagnosed with a disorder, and people are saying this is not a pre-existing condition.
Yeah.
You know, Della Donna, the reason why she wants to withdraw and still be able to get paid is because of this pre-existing condition.
Yeah.
And the league is wanting to deny her that opportunity.
We just mentioned that 2 players, NBA players, have tested positive that are in the men's side with the bubble, tested positive COVID-19. I'm sure they were told, just like the broken condom, trust me, I know what I'm doing. I would never do anything to hurt you. And that's what the league has told all these players. But I think Della Donna, she's a pretty intelligent person, it seems, just the fact that she's gotten several doctors to give her an opinion. But there's no doctor, unless I'm wrong, that's willing to go down inside of that bubble in Orlando, Florida, of all places, and say, see, nothing's going to happen to you. I just think you got to trust your own self. We got to do our own exams. And, of course, get a doctor's opinion. But a doctor can tell you that your broken leg is fine, but you know if it still hurts when you try to walk on it, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, the thing about everybody making decisions, Charlton, are not people that are going to be down in the bubble from
Yeah.
any perspective, whether it's men or women's sports, Charlton. It's always these outside individuals that are saying, yeah, it's safe, go out and play, it's okay, nothing will happen to you. If it does, then we'll just quarantine you.
Yeah.
I think it should be mandatory that, you know, the general managers as well as the team owners must participate fully. If you could get a team owner in the NFL that wants to run down on the field
Yeah.
and you know, in the fourth quarter
Yeah.
and stand amongst the players during that time, why can't he go into the training facility, you know, in the bubble or wherever they're going to be training and deal with the players at that point, Charlton? You know, it's totally hypocritical in how all of these players are being judged and treated.
Yeah.
As far as the stance from the teams and from the media. We still don't see full media broadcasts where everybody is standing or sitting in a broadcast booth together saying everything is okay. We no longer need to practice social distancing. I feel completely safe. I mean, I've even seen the reporters that are down in the NBA bubble, Charlton. They are isolated, so they're not feeling safe within themselves. But everybody wants to say it's okay for a player if they get sick from this.
Yeah, and they won't let the players bring their wives or girlfriends, and they won't. So that's why they sneak out getting the fast food, Big C. You will cross the line for some things, Big C. Fast food, so if you're hungry enough, there are a lot of players crossing that line. But I think about Della Donna and what she said with the pre-existing conditions. Unlike Blackman, Charlie Blackman for the Colorado Rockies, when you think about Betsy DeVos and Donald Trump trying to force schools to open again, even though it's been spiking around the country, you think about aging teachers. You know, there's 10 Major League Baseball umpires that said they don't want to do it based on health concerns. A lot of teachers in this country, they're over 50 years old. I would say the majority of them are on some type of blood pressure or cholesterol medication. A lot of them are out of shape. They don't exercise. They're sitting down for 5 hours a day. But you have aging teachers that must ask themselves, do I quit or do I risk my life? Or school districts, they're considering reopening, even though I think a lot in Southern California said no yesterday. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, this is a pressing question for American society. We have an individual who says everybody must stay at least 6 feet away from him, saying that all school systems must reopen.
Yeah.
I mean, he was asked that question today in a press conference, and he said, well, the kids want to go back to school. He doesn't know the name of one child,
Yeah.
K through 12, in the United States who's going to school. Nor does Betsy DeVos, the Secretary of Education.
Yeah.
Neither one of these individuals know the name of any children, Charlton, K through 12, going to school in the United States. And they're saying that these kids are biting at the bit to get back to school. I would say, well, since you want schools to open so much, you lead that march into school on the first day of school,
Yeah.
and you go sit in that classroom for that 6 hours and see how comfortable that you are in that 6 hours, and then to have the audacity to say, well, we can hold some classes outside.
Right.
I mean, how are you going to hold classes
Like it's
outside?
rallies?
You say you're in California there with 100-degree heat.
Yeah.
You're going to tell the kids, okay, sit out here in this 100-degree heat while the flies are going all around you. While you may have some bird drop on your desk or on top of your head during the day. And other bugs that's going to irritate you while you're out there. Oh, and don't worry about the noise that's going up and down the street as you sit. You're going to have enough attention span to just want to listen to the teacher while you're there sitting outside in the playground trying to learn.
Yeah, it's funny how people say, well, you can go outside. I think just as a side note, talking about going outside, Big C, when it comes to equal justice under the law, I think POTUS, he's let all of his friends and his cronies out of jail before he leaves office. He knows he's leaving office coming this next election, but he's let a lot of his friends out of jail for nonviolent felonies. But how many African-American people has he let out for the same nonviolent? Does that make sense to you, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, you get a lot of stumping on Fox News at night talking about how the president's people and his friends, they've been mistreated and miscarriage of justice, and they committed non-violent felonies, and they should not have been convicted. Look at the number of brown and black-skinned people, Charlton, that are incarcerated. They committed non-violent felonies and may never, ever see the light of day again, Charlton. But the president felt that all of the people that, backed him, that committed these non-violent felonies, should get out. So as we look at parity and equal justice in the United States under the law, Charlton, this is part of what the march is all about by all the young people around, about the social injustice that goes on. That's a perfect blatant example of social injustice is that the president will go out and free people that can help make him money, but other people, Charlton, that have been locked up for dozens of years on nonviolent felonies don't get that equal justice in the law in America, Charlton. And this is the reason why we have such an uneven society.
Yeah.
And this is what the outrage is with America.
Yeah, it's all about who you know and what kind of money you may have, but sometimes who you know is a lot more than money. I want to swing it over to the NFL because I know Daniel Snyder that said, I'll not tolerate changing the name Redskins. It just made him feel so good. It made him feel so powerful by saying that name, but it's going to change. But also, when I look at the NFL, the Carolina Panthers owner actually establishes a South Carolina scholarship, which to me is a good thing. David Tepper and his wife, Nicole, are donating. It's not a lot of money for an NFL owner, but it's a lot of money, $567,000 over the next 3 years to establish a scholarship program at the University of South Carolina. And it's going to help a lot of people in this Department of Sports and Entertainment Management. And for upcoming freshmen each year over the next 3 years will receive a 4-year scholarship of $10,000 per year. That's something, Big C. It's a step in the right direction. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, there are so many different endowments and scholarships around the country. I mean, it's nice to say, but I mean, it's limited to who has the ability to receive the scholarships. You think about Harvard, and you talk about the $537 million. Harvard has a $4 billion endowment for scholarships.
Yeah.
So it's about how the university chooses to accept certain students.
Yeah, it's a start in the right direction. And I mean, we always ask our corporations to do something, and it's nice when the sports team does it too.
But who is that scholarship? Who does it go towards? Does it go towards minority students? Is it singled out which direction of culture that it's going to go to, Charlton? Because you can set aside these scholarships and not have any minority students qualify for it.
Yeah.
So, it's status quo as usual. They're going to be on the outside looking in and not being qualified.
Yeah, I don't know who they're giving it to, if it's based on what it's based on, if it's based on race or need, but it might be some of both. I don't know the answer to that.
I mean, when you look at minority students, you're looking at need all the time.
Yeah.
The need for financial assistance. And so when these scholarships are not specified as far as where it's going to go, say that $500 million of it's going to minority students, then you pointed out that you're going to help in a certain sector of the community and society, Charlton. But if you don't do that, and it comes down under when you looked at the Equal Rights Amendment that was passed, and white women benefited from it more than black women did, Charlton, then it could be that type of endowment.
Yeah, even if you're a poor white kid, I'm sure they benefit from it and they'd appreciate it. I don't know the answer to that, though, Big C, but I do know the answer. Kansas City Chiefs, they have a beautiful, dominating defensive tackle. His name is Chris Jones. He's getting a big contract. It's only $85 million, which is paltry compared to what the Carolina Panthers are giving out. But I would take the $85 million. Defensive end, the man has reached an agreement for a 4-year contract, and that's a lot of money. $37 million is due. If he signs his name right, he gets $37 million. He better sign it right. $60 million is guaranteed for injury and $5 million in incentives, making the value of the contract $85 million. That's a lot of money for a defensive player who's oftentimes double-teamed. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, it's the going market price right now for players in the NFL. When you look at the money that's tossed around, he's still not one of the top 5 paid defensive linemen in the league. It starts with Khalil Mack, moved to Aaron Donald. They're talking about a new deals with Myles Garrett, Charlton. So there's several defensive linemen that make that money. But the thing about when you look at all these exorbitant contracts that are being signed in the NFL right now, the only money that's guaranteed is what says guaranteed, in the contract, because generally halfway through a 1 year past the halfway mark of these contracts, you have to find yourself renegotiating that contract or getting released. Yeah,
he has that guaranteed at $60 million. In fact, when you think about it, they're for the Chiefs only. You know, the Hunts own oil. They own oil money too, Big Z. If they're the only team in the NFL with 3 players making at least $60 million in guaranteed, with Jones joining Mahomes at $140 million guaranteed, and defensive end Frank Clark at $62.3 million guaranteed. They may want to guarantee some linemen some more money too, because they got to have somebody saving Mahoney's backside. Big Z, your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, it comes down to salary structure and what's going to happen with this upcoming season, whether it's going to be played or not, Charlton. Because if this season is not played, then the salary cap is going to be reduced by some $18 million.
Yeah.
So as players right now are getting their money right now, and all players who have got that, I think they still have 14 players in the NFL that are still stuck under the franchise tag, Charlton. So they just have these 1 year, 10-year contracts and haven't been able to negotiate a long-term deal.
Yeah.
It's all incumbent amongst the GMs, to make these contracts work, Charlton, for all the players on the rosters. Yes, you're going to have disproportionate contracts, and I don't care what industry that you're in, whether it's baseball, basketball, football, there's always going to be 2 or 3 players on the roster making elitist money, Charlton, and then everybody else is scrambling for the scraps that's left over.
Man, it's amazing when you were talking about African-American athletes banding together in this COVID-19 strike-ridden season anyway. If they created their own league, they could be the owners with that factoring collectively worth about $100 billion collectively as a group. Cleveland Browns on the verge of finalizing a 5-year extension worth $125 million to their pass rusher Myles Garrett. And when you think about it, Garrett was suspended from the league after he had the hit. I think he pulled the helmet off of a player for the Pittsburgh Steelers, their quarterback. And after he set out, he's actually given a lot of bad examples on how to get $125 million. Just pull somebody's helmet off and hit him over the head, get suspended, and come back and sign a $125 million extension. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, you get your money any way that you can. When you look at Myles Garrett, he's one of the elite pass rushers in the NFL, and he's a former overall number 1 pick in the draft.
Yeah.
And you think about the draft that he came out in, Charlton, and he was the first player taken that year. That's the same draft Mr. Mahomes was in,
yep.
Deshaun Watson was in, Mitch Trubisky was in, Charlton. So when you think about leading by example, Myles Garrett has exemplified when he's been on the field, that he's one of the elite down linemen in the NFL, and he can play any position on the defensive line. So to lock this guy up, they have a new regime in Cleveland. They're looking for leadership,
yep.
and he's been one of the leaders since he's been there in Cleveland.
10 sacks in his last 10 games last year. After suspended, it was actually Mason Rudolph but Mason Rudolph charged him. I know people can have their own opinion about what happened. Did he call him a bad word? Did he, whatever it was, but Mason Rudolph charged after him, and I'm wondering if he's going to give Mason Rudolph a tip. Not only did he get to sit out of the season and not get retaliated by the Steelers, but to get that big contract. It's all fair and love and war. Guys fight in practice, but when you get that kind of money, that's life-changing money. I still want to see Cleveland prove it on the field. I know they like Baker Mayfield as the quarterback on the offensive side, the team leader, but Garrett is really that defensive leader on the defensive side of the ball. That's a lot of money to throw at a defensive player who's shown that he may not be available for the whole season. That makes sense, Big C?
Well, Charlton, what you saw was a one-off, situation that occurred. That's something that's not going to occur again with Myles Garrett. I don't think Mason Rudolph will ever charge another defensive lineman.
No.
But in the game of live sports, anything can happen at any time.
Yeah.
And now that Cleveland, once they get him signed, they have him locked up for the next 7 years. I think he'll be a model citizen with that kind of coin in his back pocket.
Well, give me your thoughts, though. And again, it's just your opinion, but you've seen defensive players over the years that were just dominant. And do you feel that he's one of the top 2 or 3 linemen in the league? Because that's a lot of money for a defensive lineman. Normally they give that kind of money to running backs, or not running backs, but quarterbacks. Where do you feel he ranks right now, in your opinion, as one of the top defensive linemen in the league? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I think he's amongst the leader status when you look at what he's done statistically in the last 2 years, Dalton. He's had 23.5 sacks in the last 2 years, and you also mentioned that he missed the last 6 games of last season, so that gives him a pretty good ratio. He also had 19 tackles for loss last year, so that means that he's getting penetration into the backfield. It's not always about sacks when you look at a defensive lineman, just like with Chris Jones.
Yeah.
You have to look at the disruptability of a defensive lineman. What type of havoc and what does he force an offense to game plan for?
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people don't recognize. They'll say you have to game plan for a running back or receiver. You actually have to game plan for defensive linemen because they can become so disruptive. You have to put that extra blocker on him to chip, which may slow down your pass route.
Yeah.
You have to put that extra blocker on him when you got run plays. So that's always going to free up somebody else on the defense. So when I look at Myles Garrett's productivity and I compare that to what all other defensive linemen done in the last 3 years, he has warranted the money. But people don't understand. This is a 5-year extension that they're talking about. The Cleveland Browns also already have him for the next 2 years.
Yeah.
So all of this money is not predicated right away. It's a 7-year contract and what it runs out to be.
Yeah, I like this play. Would have loved to see him play the whole season last year. And I know everybody has their own opinion about what kind of character he has. He has excellent character, but he got charged and he did something to protect himself. That's just my opinion. I know people don't want to hear that. But something popped into my mind with these players getting more money, whether the season's going to happen or not. If you look at the bubble experience, if you could imagine how dangerous it is for NFL football players, as well as college and high school, if you're taking this bubble experience, remember people say, oh, the condom broke. No, the NBA bubble is like a contraceptive, Big C. They're trying to say, if you get inside of this, you're going to be safe. But how do you take guys like Myles Garrett or anybody else, put them on an airplane with 50 or 60 other guys, plus you got another 20 to 30 coaches and staff that are going to fly across the country. You're flying from Cleveland, say, to Kansas City to play a football game. You can't do the bubble the way they're doing down in Orlando, Florida. You're going to go into different hotels as you travel throughout the country, and there's no way to have the safety net that they have for the NBA bubble for the NFL. Even with that, 2 guys have tested positive, and we haven't even had tip-off yet, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, right now, the safety net in the NFL is just like the safety net coming from the White House. We're trying to figure it out. We don't have a clue.
Yeah.
They said they've partnered up with Oakley and created this new face shield, Charlton, that potentially will protect players and not allow passages to go through. So I guess you can't breathe if that's the case.
Yeah.
But there's no way to have safeguards when playing football, Charlton. You have sweat particles that have passages in them, and you're touching each other every play, Charlton. You're going to be in physical contact with other human beings, large human beings, every play in football.
Yeah.
So it's not just going to be the breathing, but it's going to be the passing of body fluids that football players do all the time when they're in heated battles. So there's no way to keep them safe. You can talk about traveling on the plane. You can't put somebody in a confined space and say we're practicing social distancing and we're recycling the same air.
Yeah, you can't do that. Well, you ever hear somebody say, trust me, Big C? Trust me. Well, POTUS, he said he passed some type of cognitive test, and he said he got flying colors, and his doctors are very impressed that he got flying colors on
A
his.
lot of people smoke weed these days and be flying.
Hey, people do what they want to do. The Sticky Icky. Welcome to Texas football. Sticky Icky Stadium is all fair and love and war. But I would ask you a question. I'm gonna put you on the spot, but it's gonna be a softball, okay? Who would you say is the most successful college football coaches over the last 10 years in college football, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's all about the division that you're being put in. You got to look at South Dakota State if you really want to talk about the most successful football coaches in college football, Charlton. I believe they've won 7 national championships in the last 9 years, so that's the most successful program in college football. I know a lot of people want to look at Nick Saban and Dabo Swinney. They've had an opportunity to play for the national championship, but Charlton, I mean, when you look at Ryan Day, what he did in a year and a half at Ohio State, I mean, ultimately successful. You know, when you think about Urban Meyer before he left, did a tremendous job. So, I mean, there's a bunch of great, successful college football coaches. It just depends on which scale you want to put them on.
Well, I'm going to put your knowledge of college football up against Donald Trump. He says the best coach in college football is Lou Saban. He says Lou Saban has a great college football program down there in Alabama. His name is Lou Saban. This is the same POTUS that said he passed. He got an A on his cognitive test that he understands how to put signs in lane. He can identify a stop sign from a go sign at a stoplight, Big C. But POTUS says that the best college football coach is Lou Saban down at Alabama. And I just wondered if that's the same group that gave him the test on his cognitive skills, Big C.
Well, you know, there used to be a show on television, I believe it was Are You Smarter Than a Third Grader or something like that.
Yeah.
And so I think he might have been in one of those tests where, you know, you give a second grade.
Yeah. Nick Saban might be saying he can't believe they gave some of his paychecks to Lou Saban, Big C. He might want to go back to Alabama and find out where the rest of his money is, but it's all fair and love and war. And speaking of money, man, our show goes by way too fast, but Tiger Woods is going to make a return to normal, what he hopes normal is. Coming up, Dublin, Ohio, the PGA Tour is back 5 weeks that has already delivered some tournaments, some low-scoring tournaments, and some great play with no fans. You just can't really get into it. But Tiger Woods trying to get to that 18th championship. I'm sorry, 83rd championship. He already has 15 majors, trying to get to 18 for Jack. But if he wins this tournament, then he'll reach number 83 on the board. He has right now 82 tagged with Sam Snead. But Tiger's a pretty smart guy. He has a yacht. I don't think his yacht's as big as a yacht that the Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones has. But he spent more time just sitting back and watching to see what happens with the other golfers. Some have tested positive for COVID-19. Some have come back. But Tiger has the kind of money where he can sit back and wait like waiting on the catfish. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you know, it's good to see him back out on the tour. It's been several months since he's been out there. He's going to be tied with Brooks Koepka and Roy McIlroy, Charlton. So you're being paired with the two longest drivers on the tour. So that's going to put him at some disadvantage. But one thing Tiger will do is move the broadcast needle this weekend. They'll have viewership.
Yeah, they'll have viewership. But even with that, I watched the tournament up in Tahoe over the weekend. It's so gorgeous because most of the time they would pan toward Lake Tahoe, which is one of the most beautiful lakes probably anywhere in the world. And so having that with the Sierra Nevada mountains and the beautiful water out in Lake Tahoe, the golf tournament was almost like an ancillary thing. People went to see the lake, and they just happened to find some guys playing golf on a beautiful Lake Tahoe, Big C. But that was an appeal. I don't know if there's any courses outside of Pebble Beach in California that can rival Lake Tahoe, but I will watch if Tiger's golfing. It'd be nice for the Tiger Countdown. I think a lot of players have been robbed of what's being able to go out and get their majors, get their championships done. COVID-19 has done it to everybody, but I still want to ask you, we talked earlier in the show how baseball in South Korea, they're playing pro baseball. Nobody's in the seats. Nobody's really watching for more than maybe an inning or two. I even recorded the tournament up in Lake Tahoe. I didn't watch the whole thing, Big C. But Tiger can make you sit down and watch, or is it going to be, let's watch him for the first day or two and then get back to whatever you do on the weekends, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, if he's competitive, people will stay glued to the tube. I mean, and that's the key. But by Tiger participating, you're going to get a better viewership than what you would have had without him.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if Tiger plays enough to be challenging right now. And when you're playing with the two longest drivers on the tour, it's going to put you at a disadvantage. Will that make Tiger press even more in trying to compete? Because when you think about DeChambeau, he's driving the ball 350 yards. McIlroy's out there 320, 330.
Yeah.
So Tiger's only in the 300-yard range now, Charlton, because of his age and all the illnesses that he had.
Yeah.
So can he be competitive with these two strong young golfers?
Yeah, and I think he can because he's had time to rest up. But again, the more you play, the better you get from what I understand. But I wish him the best. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. Just say Google or Alexa play Big C Sports Podcast. Really appreciate that. Before we close out, Big C, in Monaco, banned Olympic medalists now charged for false evidence. Imagine a person that's accused of using the needle also charged with false evidence. In Monaco, Olympic race walk silver medalist Maria Guadalupe Gonzalez lost her appeal against a 4-year ban for doping and faced new charges on Tuesday for using false evidence. Isn't doping false evidence? Isn't that enough, Big C?
Well, you know, you got to look at the lengths of athletes have to go to, Charlton, to be competitive. It's not just an Olympic athlete, it's professional athletes, collegiate athletes. I mean, all athletes are trying to get an edge, and it's about skirting around tests and cheating tests. It's just a matter that you don't get caught. Because we don't know how many athletes have been professionals and collegiate
Yep.
and have won championships, Charlton, by cheating.
Yeah.
It's just everybody doesn't get caught. And
Yeah.
especially on the professional level, the more money you have, the less opportunity you have of getting caught.
Yeah, was it Lance Armstrong? There's Ben Johnson. Was it Maria Sharapova? A lot of those people that have tried to win, they've tested positive for something, even if it means they got caught cheating. The Athletics Integrity Unit published a ruling from the Court of Arbitration for Sports, which dismissed an appeal this month by the 20-kilometer walk runner at the 2016 Rio de Janeiro Olympics. Who's the guy that won all those swim awards that was also caught doing some things? He had some sticky icky in his lungs, and he's one of the best swimmers in the world. Can't remember his name for the life of me, Big C. But a lot of people that win, they either doing something to put in their lungs or something in their veins, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, you know, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. I mean, that's always
Yeah.
an old adage in
From
sports.
Texas.
And I don't look down on athletes who try to get an edge because everyone's getting an edge somehow. It all just depends on the finances you have to create the type of edge that you can afford.
Yeah, it's about the edge that you can afford, and the more money, the more edge, therefore the more affordability. I know everybody has their opinion about will football be back. I know they're going to keep kicking that ball down the road. Today would have been the All-Star game for Major League Baseball down at Chavez Ravine Dodger Stadium, Southern California. That's on the pause. They're looking at throwing the first pitch in about 9 days, looking at the San Francisco Giants and the Los Angeles Dodgers. I don't know what's going to happen, but I hope, and for the sake of science, that people will listen to their doctors. And if you have to get a second opinion, get a second opinion. But I'd be surprised if there's any intelligent parent that when their child gets sick or has a fever of 103, you take them to your nearest politician to see if they're okay. You're probably taking them to the doctor. Big C, I hope that sports will follow that same metaphor. Big C, your thoughts?
They're not going to follow that same medical Charlton. Sports already has a one-dimensional mind. It's trying to find a way to play the game to appease the financial entity.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of people, they'll do like Charlie Blackmon said, hey, I feel fine. A lot of guys feel fine before they go to the doctor and have to get something fixed. It's all fair and war, and we hope that they'll use the brighter minds to come to the rescue. Big C, back in the day, there's a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young man, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, Charlton, I'm looking forward to some sense and sensibility. That seems like that's a long way from everything that everyone desires today in the world of sports because the games are trying to be played at all costs. And once again, I want to thank the frontline healthcare workers, the nurses, doctors, first responders, for this marvelous job you're doing in this terrible pandemic that we're having in America.
And we really appreciate everything that everybody's doing to keep them safe. You can stay safe, too, every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, that's never, ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man, woman, or child going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no racism or domestic violence should ever be tolerated. As we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.